Well, guys, we come to the end of it. The long, I think, 2 or 3 year road that was the Snow White live-action remake in 2025. And as predicted, the drop-off only got worse from there. On its second weekend, it has a drop of 66%. And that might not sound like the worst drop ever, but it is when you consider how little it made in its first weekend. It only made $14 million over this second weekend, and it was beat out by an original film written by Chuck Dixon, directed by David Ayer, called A Working Man. It made more money at the box office domestically, $15 million, than Snow White. The big IP live-action cash grab of a film was beat out by an R-rated action movie that was original. Now, I can't think of any more sweet, sweet justice than that, but it does speak to how bad the Snow White film is, how big the controversy was, and it seems right now that Hollywood is very, very willing to move on from this film in more ways than one. They're trying to quiet down the discussion about it, try to move on to other things. That's why they did the Avengers Doomsday live stream, and just around the corner is the Minecraft movie, and I don't expect that to be better either. It is tracking to do a bit better, though. But Disney has, once again, completely abandoned this film, it would seem, and they're completely shifting the blame, it would seem, on Rachel Zegler. There was that article that came out that was pretty much a hit piece about just how difficult to work with her behind the scenes, and even though I believe that to be true, I do believe that it was definitely a hit piece throwing her under the bus and trying to shift the blame entirely on her. In fact, the producer's son, the son of the producer of the Snow White movie, really lambasted Rachel Zegler on Instagram and talked about how immature she was with that pro-Palestine post that she refused to take down, and basically just being a difficult person to work with. Now, is Rachel Zegler solely to blame for all of the Snow White debacle? Well, no and yes. Now, let's break this down. Who is really to blame for Snow White failing so spectacularly? Is it just Rachel? No, it's not, because even if they had cast a completely different person for this role who had no political controversy, this movie still would have failed, because, having seen the movie myself, it is possibly one of the worst live-action remakes ever, and that is saying something. It is truly an unwatchable film unless you're watching with a bunch of friends to dog on it or something. It is really that bad on every level.
In fact, I find it quite amusing, telling me to play nice. Well, nice will only get you nowhere. Nice won't get the doing done. Ambitious girls must be vicious girls.
And there's a lot of things going into that don't have to do with Rachel Zegler, and a lot of things going on with the controversy that didn't have to do with Rachel Zegler. Disney is the one in the first place that has looked at all of their films, no matter what it is, and abandoned the source material and said those things were wrong, we need to correct them for modern audiences. And that is what really went into the mindset of Snow White, and that is why the film completely rejects the original. It only is in there as a peppering of the film in this new, with seemingly AI-written rendition of a fairy tale with all of this other lore. It is Disney that decided that all of the aspects of the original were unacceptable and that they have to keep making these modern reimaginings. And these modern reimaginings reject basic things, like they originally didn't think that true love could exist. And they also reject basic things like how the original was made. The original was simplistic and just tried to be fun. This one cakes on a bunch of lore that winds up being irrelevant. So it's a film that misunderstands all that made the original work, and also one that can't even go by the basic themes of that one because it thinks that everything is problematic. I did a video last year talking about the biggest problem in film, and I just talked about how everything, like, you can't even have human characters anymore. You can't even have basic human elements anymore because everything has been judged as problematic, needs to be fixed, needs to be changed, and that is how they make their movies these days. You can't even have the basic fairy tale premises anymore, like having Snow White be a white character like she's supposed to be. That is what's really a problem with these films, and that is what is turning people off to these films, because you can't even have the basic human storylines anymore. You can't even have basic common sense going into making them. And they would have still had a non-white Snow White, regardless if they had cast Rachel Zegler for it, and that would have still brought about the controversy where you can't even have a character named Snow White be Snow White. Even that has to be changed. All of that was leading into the controversy that just blew up from Rachel Zegler because the narcissistic way that she described their version of the film and admitted that she was scared of the original and hadn't even seen it since she was very little, like, that was just the volcano explosion. The volcano was building up for a long time of people getting frustrated with Disney, looking at everything old. Some things more people are more emotionally attached to than others, but just this general thing of Disney looking at these old things, saying they needed to be changed and making them worse than they were before. I use the Sid analogy. It's the looking at the dolly that you love, taking it up to your room, and attaching a pteranodon's head to it and saying that you've made it better. That's what Disney has been doing.
Oh no, Hannah! What? Look, Janie! Hey! She's sick! No, she's not! I want to perform one of my operations! No. Doctor, you've done it! Janie's all better now.
Rachel Zegler just became a spokesperson for all of that, where the narcissism that she talked about the original was just everything that people had come to hate about the way that Disney had already been behaving about their films. And so that was the explosion. When you have a volatile or toxic or just annoying personality, it's easy for that to pick up and get a lot of attention on the internet, and Rachel Zegler's did, but it wouldn't have happened so spectacularly perhaps if it wasn't for the build-up happening to this moment. And that's the big thing, is that this would have still been an awful film, still would have looked awful in their trailers if anyone else had been playing that lead role. That isn't to say that Rachel Zegler isn't also a bit to blame for it, because she definitely did continue to stoke fires, and the more ridicule that she got, the more negative attention got to the movie. And it was so widespread, I'll tell you, I remember back when Brie Larson was getting a lot of hate, but I think that that was really contained to the internet, because I remember that no one in real life, no one apart from the internet knew that. Everyone in real life I knew wanted to go see Captain Marvel because it was another Marvel movie. But the flip side is with Rachel Zegler, I don't know anyone in real life who didn't know about that stuff, and it sort of exemplifies just how tired people are of this narcissism and of Hollywood wanting to change things, and so that definitely harmed the film. And I'll tell you how it did, because as this dislike of the actress grew, it made Disney feel like they couldn't promote the film with her anymore. Usually with films, you have your lead actresses going on like Saturday Night Live and talk shows and all of that kind of stuff. I think Rachel Zegler only did one, and carefully pre-recorded and all of that. They canceled the London premiere. They wouldn't have press come to do traditional interviews at the indoor LA premiere, and usually they have them outdoors. And they didn't have Rachel Zegler go on the traditional press tour. The conversation around Snow White had severely depleted before the film because Disney wasn't doing as much promotion, because they feel like they couldn't, because they couldn't keep a leash on Rachel Zegler to not say anything. Now, some people defend Rachel Zegler because she has said things that agree with their political beliefs. And I'll tell you right now, I don't care what your political beliefs are. What we are talking about here is the success of the film. And the consistent thing I see with Rachel Zegler is not that she's a political activist and that turns people off. The consistent thing that I've seen with her is that she is a narcissist. I went through her old Twitter site just to see the kinds of things she'd been tweeting, and she did a couple posts about Gaza and all of that, just a couple occasional ones though. What was constant on her old Twitter site was tweets of her preening about herself, whether it was retweeting things that I guess she thought applied to her about, I am so talented, I am so amazing, it's amazing how many different talents I have, and just retweeting stan tweets about how amazing she is. And listen, people stereotype that every Hollywood actor has an ego. Literally no other Hollywood actor that I've seen in recent days has a social media webpage where they're constantly retweeting things about how incredible they are. That has been the consistent thing about Rachel Zegler, not her activism or whatever. I think her activism is of the ilk. You know, there's activists who actually care what they're talking about, and then there's activists where I'm going to go do this stuff because it makes me feel good and because it makes me look good to other people, it makes me look superior. That's what she looks like, at least to me, because the consistent thing about her is that she's high on herself, and that is what I've seen. And that has gotten her in trouble with Disney before. That does not have to do with activism. I wouldn't even say that it's necessarily activism in the criticism of the original Snow White, but it was most certainly narcissistic. And it seems that she is trying to move on her social media from this stuff as well. But Disney has completely thrown her under the bus over that stuff. And I think it is going to have effects on the future. Now, the problem is, I fear that Disney is going to completely blame Rachel Zegler for all of this and not their own mistakes. It was they who decided that they were going to have a non-white Snow White movie. It was they who decided that they needed to change everything from the original. It's they who keep cashing in on these awful AI-written remakes. But I think that they've realized that they can't afford to have a movie like this happen again. But are they blaming the right thing for it? Are they understanding that there was more than just Rachel Zegler going into the film? She was just the cherry on top, the place that got the most noise, what people came to see as the representation of this film. Well, there are going to be changes going forward in Hollywood after this disaster, because this is the biggest disaster in my lifetime that I have ever seen for a film in Hollywood. Even more than maybe The Flash, because a lot of people just didn't care about that film. This movie was basically what all of people's frustrations come out as. So what's going to change? Well, I think between Rachel Zegler and the Gina Carano situation, I think that in the future, they're going to create something. There's going to be some sort of contract about what you can and can't say politically tied to a film. And that's why I say Rachel Zegler, posting whatever she wants to post for her activism on her Twitter site apart from the film she's doing, perfectly fine. It is her right to exercise free speech. But it was so foolish to tweet Free Palestine under the promotion of the Snow White movie when Disney had already made it clear they wanted this to be, they're trying to move it away from the political discussion because they had already gotten a lot of hate for it. It's foolish. Why? Because the repercussions of that, of creating more of a political argument over a film is going to be in the future. These companies are going to have an even tighter leash on what actors and actresses can and can't say because of that, what's happened there. They might have a contract, like if you sign up to a film, then we have the obligation to sue you if you talk about these topics then we don't want you to talk about. That is what's going to happen, and that's why I also say it was narcissism and tomfoolery on Rachel Zegler's point, and she's not actually going to help her cause. It was all, to me, it was more preening about, look at me supporting this thing, and it's actually going to have negative repercussions on people in the future who might want to speak out on something. But in addition to that, let's talk about other ways that I think that Hollywood will change. I think that they just do not want to have another Rachel Zegler, Brie Larson situation. They don't want to have these hate trains come to their films. Once again, I think that they're going to rein in their actresses and their activism a bit more, because I think that Hollywood at least identifies that activism might be part of it. So that's going to be part of it. They're going to rein in actresses. They're going to try not to have that anymore. Like, where is Brie Larson for Doomsday? Even though she's changed her demeanor a lot, I don't think we're going to see Brie Larson anywhere near Doomsday or Secret Wars or the She-Hulk, because I don't think that they want any kind of that backlash for their films anymore. And I think that other things that we are going to see, are we not going to see any more non-Caucasian leads for roles? Well, of course we're going to see more non-Caucasian leads for Disney live-action remakes. We've got Lilo and Stitch, and we've got Moana, and those are original characters created for their properties, so they're not going to have to compete with any other fairy tale or have accusations of being race bends or not being accurate to the culture or story, so that's still going to continue, and that's good. Like, we've still got our leads out there who have their own things that don't have to be in competition to anyone else. However, do I think that Disney is going to be bold enough to race bend iconic characters anymore? I think we are gradually going to see less and less of that, because the conversation around that has just become so volatile, and I don't think Disney wants any more of that. That said, are we going to get more live action remakes? Obviously, I just mentioned we are, because Lilo and Stitch is coming. It actually looks all right, and as long as they're making money for Disney, they won't stop making them. So that is on you. If you want them to really stop making live action remakes, then you have to stop going to see them, because right now they're going to blame the failure of Little Mermaid and Snow White on the culture war discourse, and they are not going to stop making these kinds of movies, because movies that are free from the culture war discourse, like Mufasa, still made money, and that's an unfortunate look at the human race. But what other ways do I think that Disney and Hollywood in general is going to change? Well, we're already seeing it, and I'm going to have a video on some of this later in the week. As we saw with Avengers Doomsday, there weren't a lot of women in their cast. I think that the pendulum is swinging back hard, as I said it was going to for months now. There's going to be a lot of overcorrecting. They're not going to listen to the activists on Twitter so much, because even as those activists defend Rachel Zegler, they're still not making this movie successful. You know, you guys, with all your activism, you have to understand at some point these movies need to make money. The reason why these were such a good platform to try to, blast your messages out from is because you saw them as a place that made a lot of money and that a lot of people listened to. But when you ruin that, when you don't care about making money at all, you no longer have a platform. And that's what's wrong problem with these activists. They don't understand. They always think the ends justify the means. They never have any strategy in promoting their stuff. It's always just scream from the rooftop, scream at anyone to get your way, and go down with the ship. Die on every hill. No strategy whatsoever, like Rachel Zegler did. And Rachel Zegler ended up ruining her platform. She will never work in Hollywood again because she's gotten the difficult to work with label, and that is the worst thing you can get in Hollywood. The worst thing you can be told in Hollywood is that you are difficult to work with. You will harm their film. So Rachel Zegler actually downed her platform by going that far. No strategy, no thought on the repercussions that might happen to her and other people who might want to speak out like her because she went forward like that. So now she's not going to have the same platform. She is never going to be as relevant again as this film. And so that's why it was such a bad idea. But that's what we're going to see a lot from Hollywood, is that this activism and how much it's been pushed for years now is backfiring because it's been associated with so many films, whether you think it's the reason that it's failed or not. Snow White, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, so much of this stuff has failed with activism attached. And now Hollywood is going to overcorrect. It's going to be harder to get female characters in films. It's going to be harder to push diversity in films because they are associating that with backlash and people not actually going to the films. And some of that is bad because, diversity in and of itself isn't a bad thing. Having more female characters in and of itself isn't a bad thing. But the way that they pushed it with reckless abandon, not strategizing, not trying to get these things to be successful is what killed it. So yes, what I think is going to happen is that Disney is just going to try to be as politically neutral as possible. And I think with their live action remakes, they're going to try to be as reverential to the originals and as accurate to them as they possibly can, because now they see a lack of success of when they get away from that. So is this going to be a positive thing or a negative thing for the future? It's going to be mostly positive, because I would like to see some respect for the original properties again. I would like to see more emphasis on getting audiences to like these films rather than blind activism that doesn't have any strategy behind it. It would be really nice to be able to talk about films again and not have any of this culture war discourse attached to it, people accusing you of things and all of that, because this is entertainment that we're talking about. It's not supposed to be a constant war. So those will all be positive things. It sounds like maybe with cinema, we're getting to a time when they're not so embedded with political activism and arguing and politics. However, what's not going to change is, I think, some things that Disney is not taking the blame for, and that is a lack of creativity, a lack of reliance on creators, refusal to make anything original or take risks, just a constant reliance on IP films. Whenever Hollywood is in a bind, the thing that they constantly go to is another movie, Coco 2, Maleficent 3, constant remakes, reboots, and sequels. And that is what they are going to constantly rely on, even if it's not embedded with any sort of political controversy or any of that kind of stuff. That still doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to make good movies, because they're still not relying on their creatives. They're still relying on the cheapest IP cash grabs that they can. And it's looking more and more like the future is going to be the same thing. Maybe $1 or $2 billion hits as people decide that they might like one of these movies or still are interested in some of these IPs. But Hollywood has yet to be on a healthy track record. They're very, very reactionary right now, and they're not actually taking all of the steps necessary to get their business back on track and be healthy right now. But at least, we finally might be done with the culture war discourse after this movie, because it's going to make Disney pivot hard. But make no mistake, while Rachel Zegler is to blame for some of this, Disney is ultimately the people who hired her and the one responsible for this film and how bad it is. And no one was going to see this thing, even if Rachel Zegler was a wonderful person, because of how bad the film is and how bad Disney's films in general are. It was pretty obvious to see this was going to be a disaster because that is the consistent output coming from Disney, especially with their live action remakes. That is all I got for you guys today. And now we're going to put a lid on the Snow White movie. What did you think of this video? Did you think there's anything more that needs to be added to this topic? If you want to support this channel, please consider becoming a patron, as these wonderful people have done. I have a lot great more videos out and plans for my own filmmaking so that we can circumvent how unhealthy the Hollywood business has become. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys next time.